what I hear is you can't just vote. You also have to make sure that your politician represents you and you're represented well down there. You got to go the extra mile if you want to see things change politically. And I'm going to start with Catherine on this. What role does a citizen play after they vote in ensuring that politicians, proposals, and policies are enacted? How engaged should a voter be after the vote?
I think absolutely engaged. So one of the problems in the city is like we have this gap between sometimes the business that happens at the council table or in the legislatures, whether it's state or national, and their policies that don't touch people. So a lot of it, people get disengaged, but it is absolutely our responsibility and our job to participate in public comment, getting to know your council person, developing a relationship, getting involved, being vocal, being a part of your block club, whatever you need to do to we're in this together. But I do think, citizens also absolutely have the power. We know what issues are important to us, and we have got to start calling it out. You're not talking about anything that's important to me. This is meaningless. This is fluff. This is, we went through the last 10 years of the city where, we saw, the headlines of the major newspapers didn't necessarily reflect the lives of Detroiters. They didn't talk about the water shutoffs. They didn't talk about any number of issues that Detroiters face.
Once again, my answer is going to be unconventional because I feel like, again, it depends on the person, right? If you have a mother who's working 80 hours a week to take care of her family because she's making below minimum wage, to support herself, how active do you expect her to be, right? She's tired. She's taking care of her kids. But then you have a person. It's just, I feel like it takes community. I don't think it's up to one individual person to know and do every single thing. It's like, how do we make sure information is accessible? How do we make sure it's easy? We're in the age of technology to where I should be able to go online and figure out, okay, which bills was passed, what was passed in Congress, what was passed local and state level, right? But we haven't created these platforms. The technology is there, but we haven't invested into it enough to where we're able to make stuff easily accessible. And our motto at Google is, how do we make information more easily accessible to every single human being here in not the United States, the world, right? I just elongated it, but making it more accessible. And again, we have these technologies, but the priorities is not there for it to be an investment and where we put money into. And just think about all the jobs you can create from teaching kids, one in school, how to do coding, how to create infrastructures, right? It's about thinking more futuristic and planning these things out. But once again, the system is not designed for us to really learn to be able to access jobs that enable us to do for our communities. So when you think about stuff like when our rates in the Google world, when it comes to engineers, when it comes to being able to access positions of equity, right? We don't have a lot of times the background for it, the training for it, the education for it, the skill sets, exactly, because they don't want us to have access to that power to be able to create change for ourselves. They leave us handicapped into where we're always dependent on other folks to do stuff, whereas if we had the skill set to do it, we'll do it for ourselves. Right. So with that being said, it's kind of complicated for me asking me that because I feel like it's situational. We can't expect, even in Congress, when I interned in Congress, when I was with the CBCF, we did all the research for the Congresswoman. She didn't go do research for herself. We drafted her bills. We drafted her laws. We did all that. What she did was go to the floor and present it. Right. And she probably read it 10 minutes before she got on the floor. Right. So you can't expect one person to even who's elected to know every single thing that's happening. It takes community, which is why you hire folks, which is why you have block clubs, right? So the question should be, how do we as a community make sure that we're all informed, that we're all engaged to make sure that we're progressing ourselves together?
you hit on something that was serious about the power of the staff of elected officials.
That's the appointees.
In my day job, and really hats off to Google for trying to create a space where people of color, specifically Black folks, can access data in an open source fashion. In my day job, I don't want to talk much about it, but I focus on civic engagement all day long, and we've used Google Groups to like share the census legacy files right across the country, so they will be broken down for people to take into analysis on their own communities for redistricting, right? And so the bigger headache, like for me being an IT professional, for a very long time, is that when it comes to finding people of color, specifically Black people who are okay with geospatial recognition, right, and working in GIS formats, like not just about the stuff that's sexy about facial recognition, it's the fact that like there are over 600,000 parcels of land in the United States, and they all have IDs with them, and how do we put them together to identify our communities to access power? That's what Ida B. Wells did when she made sure the NAACP knew, and she took documentation of how many Black men were being lynched every day, because Black men didn't have the courage nor the gall to go and ask for the information and then to record it. So, being in this space of an organizer, that's what organizers do. They are the meat in between these fabrics across people to say this issue does mean something to you. That I know, like, hey, the organizations that right now are very strapped for capacity. When we talk about the organizations in our community, and we talked about the Black Slate, all the folks who were calling me Young Buck and a Black Slate 20 years ago are still in leadership there. That's a problem. And it's not a problem to them, but it's like, well, we got to figure out how do we get back connected. Digitally, we have found more ways to do things faster, which I think makes us depreciate the purpose of personal communication. And we got to get back to that. That's one of the things that everyone across the world says, oh, Black people in America, they really have a great way to be interpersonal communication. That is their fabric. Well, we can't let Facebook take that away from us. And so when it comes down to the fact that, like, hey, it's the organizations, our common interests that keep us engaged from election to election, between candidate to office. And so, the better ways we do that, I'm always a squeaky wheel, but my congressperson doesn't hear from me about every issue. In this case, Facebook does help. Don't just give them doo-doo all the time. Give them some sugar. If they're doing something well for you, like the earned income tax credit that's giving almost every family in the United States an extra $300, that's good. They need to hear that, because just now, Congress decided to take away, I think, almost $2 trillion of investment over the next 10 years, because they don't hear enough from us about the good stuff, the stuff that we say, yeah, give me more of that. That's what elected officials don't hear. And finally, I really want to go back and echo the fact that democracy is the main product of our government. If they feel that we have to pay into that system in order for it to work, and I'm not talking about taxes, but we literally have to pay into it for it to operate, then this is no longer a democracy, okay? And our vote will be diluted, because we will never be able to match the power of a Jeff Bezos, who's put hundreds of people into space. He's probably going to be a trillionaire before I die, right? So the only power that we have to correct the road that we're on is our collective power, and we got to be serious about it.